first class of this year. So thanks for making the time. I was thinking I wasn't sure if anybody would come today because it was so cold, and I thought the roads are clear. Probably there's nothing else to do, right? We're tired of puzzles and board games and cards and gin and all the rest of it. So we'll do a little pruning today. Who was at the class in November when I kind of ended the year with winter pruning? A couple people. So we'll just review just a couple little points from that class and really try to focus on fruits and berries today. A lot of times in the pruning class there's just not enough time in an hour to talk about everything we have in our yard, so we kind of invented this class a couple years ago as a little bonus. We can certainly touch on it too. My fruit class is coming up on the 27th in a couple weeks on a Saturday. Everything here with the cold is delayed. You can see about 2,000 roses in boxes here that I have to protect from frost till they get planted. Usually we're already done with roses and we're in the middle of planting fruit trees right now, so we've just kind of been delayed about a week and a half here with the weather. So we will start this week and hopefully get caught up pretty quick. So we will have fruit trees out before the fruit class here in a couple weeks. So everybody's got a copy of the handout, I hope. I made enough. There's like, what, 10 pages of light reading there for tonight on the nightstand at some point, right? But that'll give me some good tips kind of on general pruning, and then I really tried to write up a pretty good description of our major edibles, from spur fruits to stone fruits to grapes to blueberries to raspberries, kind of all the things we're tending to grow in our home orchard. So you can take a look at that list. We're going to go through a few pictures here, and certainly we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards, so ask away. It's a little warmer in here than outside, so the longer we stand here, the happier I am, right? So, with basic pruning, we always kind of start with choose your weapons wisely. So everybody's got different hands, different size, different preferences. I got huge hands, so I don't have a problem cutting most things with my big Felco pruners. Others, my mother, I always use an example. Wonderful gardener, still gardening in her 80s, but she needs something easier, so we have different style pruners for different folks. If you kind of look at your typical, bypass pruner, we tend to carry Zenport, which is kind of a Felco knockoff. Who's got Felcos? I got some in my holster here. So we have like $100, $40. So if you're not using them like me, 50 times a day, and when we prune roses here, more like 1,000 times a day, this is going to be plenty for a homeowner. Great quality pruner. I can still replace the parts, all the rest. Easy to use. But we have, kind of a little smaller blade. You've got your standard size, which is what I tend to use. This is oftentimes a really good choice for a lot of folks that maybe don't have a stronger wrist. So this actually pivots in your hand, so instead of going like that, the wrist kind of rolls. So if you've had issues with, carpal tunnel or problems kind of squeezing, that may be a good option for you. You'll see on the right there a ratchet style pruner too, and if anyone's tried those, we have a couple in the store. That's more where I go click, 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 and I'm not getting it all in one big fell squeeze. So maybe again a little bit easier on the hands. Loppers, we carry a couple. I use this quite a bit. I have these in my garage. This is what we call a vine lopper or mini lopper. I think it's a little easier to use for most homeowners. This is a great one for roses. And when we talk kind of grapes and kiwis and some things like that, and certainly anything in the yard, I can get that into a spot a little bit easier versus, going for the big dog and trying to get that in there. And there's a lot of times we struggle with leverage, and it's really hard to get a good clean cut is always my issue. So it's not that I never use the loppers, but I think choosing the right tool, the right weapon for the right job is going to make it a little tidier for you. On the right there's a pull pruner. That's my pull pruner in my garage. You can see the difference with that is going to be chain versus rope. So I got tired of buying a pull pruner like every other year. I use mine a lot here. I volunteer with the Arboretum at home. I do some help with some friends in their yard. I got tired of replacing the thing. $100, $100, $100. So I found a little higher quality one. Yes, I'll have to pay, a couple $100 to get that, but I'm on probably year 8 with mine, and it still works good as new. So it's like everything in life, you tend to get what you pay for. So we get a couple good. I have that one in the store. I think this is a pretty good one too here. It is rope, but again, I think for most homeowners that are using this 4, 5, 6 times a year versus 60 times a year, I think this would last you plenty long, especially keep it indoors. Don't keep it out where the the rope's going to rot on you, and you can always replace that too. That's a pretty easy mechanism. I can saw as well as pull and prune, so I can get up a good 10-12 feet with that one. Mine, I can get up even a little bit farther if you got the back to hold it, right? I'm looking for a good quality, what they call giraffe pruners. Anyone have one of those that they like? You know, kind of the stick that I can just trigger handle at the end and kind of reach into something. They used to call them long reach pruners or giraffe pruners. Most of the mechanisms, I hate to be frank, but just suck. Every one I've tried is like, okay, that's great for a year, and then that spring gave loose, so it just doesn't work anymore. So we're looking for a good replacement. That's a pretty good, useful tool as well. And then the head shears on the right there, this is the same pair I have in my garage. So really lightweight, being aluminum. I like this because I've got a little extendable handle clip so I can get a little bit more leverage or extend them up a little bit better. But that's one you keep them sharp. We're not doing any shearing this time of year. Let's start with that. But when we get into spring and we want to clip our hedge or do something a little quicker, it's either that or hopefully not too much of the chainsaw on the stick, right? I think probably the two most useful things I'm going to show you are these last two right here. If you don't have, well, actually I brought mine in so I can show you. Who's got one of the sharpeners already? Hopefully, yeah, if you don't, this would be a great purchase with a discount today. So this is a really easy sharpener versus me having to, 5 years ago, take this all apart in the winter, grind it on the grinder, sharpen it, whatever you're going to do. This is something I can just pull out of my drawer and literally whip it along the blade, sharpen it to a fine teeth, and off we go again. So this is not only, you know, pruners, loppers, everything. My wife stole my first one in this kitchen because it does knives and scissors and other stuff as well. And I love this. I've got a little screw cap, keep some oil in there. I've got a little brush, I can clean them, you can oil them. You know, it's a really useful, I think, little tool. I mean, these are like 12 bucks after you get the discount today, so that's a great purchase for a quick sharpen. The last is a folding saw, and this is what I use more than anything. I probably go through one of these every 2-3 years because I think for the price they're not worth taking into the sharpening shop to sharpen, but you can do that as well. I love this. This is what I call my pocket saw. So a little case, I can whip this out, and versus a lopper, I can really get into tight places. They're razor sharp. Be really careful with your fingers. I've got a couple hunks over the years. But you can get into a plant, a multi-stem plant, when we talk about blueberries and some other things here. I'm going to get into the base of that really easily and get a perfect cut versus a lopper trying to get the right angle, and eventually I always leave stubs, if you know what I mean. So that pruning saw might be a great choice to kind of keep things a little tidier. So pocket one, or if you want to go for the big dog, we go for the larger one. Okay, so that's one we can use for a little bit bigger limbs as well. Okay. The brand new one we just got in yesterday, it came in time, is this. Anyone tried these guys? So I should pass this around because you are not going to believe how light this is. My mother got me onto these. Feel how light that is for a lopper. I mean, it weighs nothing. And with the cog gear, it's really easy to cut. And that'll cut some pretty good sized branches, I think up to 1.5 inches or so. So that may be something, we got a few, we can get more. But that may be something to add to the arsenal of weapons in the garage. If you're looking for maybe an easy little small lopper, we tried those at a show last fall, and I thought that was pretty useful, especially being so lightweight. I thought it was really, really easy. Okay? So anybody got any questions on the tools real quick, and we'll get into kind of some pruning here. Everybody's good? Got all your weapons ready to go. So just real quick, a review from November. If we talk types of pruning, we've got pinching, shearing, thinning out, and heading back. Now we're going to not talk about pinching and shearing at all today because it's not the time to walk out and pinch our geraniums and perennials. That's for the spring, summer, fall. Same with shearing. We are not out doing any kind of pruning on evergreens, shrubs, things like that here in the winter. We don't want to, you know, if we talk about the essence of pruning, what would it be? I want to encourage growth, right? Direct it in a certain way, revive my plant. We're not growing here in the winter, and I see it a lot driving around. Folks go out in the fall too late or in the winter and shear their boxwood, their laurel, whatever it is, and you're going to have some foliage damage. You know, typically they'll grow through it, but just to be safe, we no shearing this time of year. Save that for the springtime. We get that out next. But we're going to talk a lot of thinning and heading back, and this is going to really be for all plants and we'll talk some specifics on fruit here for the rest of the class. Well, this is going to be for all plants. So I just borrowed a piece of a Japanese maple here that needed to get thinned out. So I started by thinning this out of the crown of a giant tree. So I thinned this branch out. But if I look at that, you know, is there anything wrong with it? Not necessarily, but just to kind of show you the difference, if I look at that branch here, if I'm going to thin, I'm not chopping back, I'm not shearing with my hedge trimmers, I'm picking pieces that I want to get out of the crown of the tree. So I'm going to thin out branches like that. I'm not changing the shape, I'm not changing the structure, but I've opened it up. I got more light, I got more air, I got less disease, I've got a happier tree, frankly. So if I go through and do that, it's more, okay, well, let's get this wood out of the center that's maybe crossing against each other, and I can thin out as much as I want and open up that branch. Is that kind of making sense to everybody? So that's a huge part of fruit pruning. We're going to talk here in a minute. The other one is heading back. So that means I really say, you know, I'm the trunk, and there's my branch coming off, and holy smokes, there's my front door. What did I plant this tree here for? Either I got a couple choices. I got to limb this up, right, and get it above me, or I got to get this cut back so it's not going to whack the mailman or whoever else. So I can head back to wherever I want to, okay? It's not going to look pretty, but let's just say I cut that there. You know, I come out there and say, what have you done to my tree? And then next year, the energy goes into these branches, they start to develop, and it looks a lot better here after it grows for a season. So I can head this back, you know, anywhere above where I've got branches. The biggest thing is, if I'm gonna head this back and I want this to grow, I don't want to prune right there. What's gonna happen? This won't grow because I cut right on it. The next one will, now I got a dead stump, right? So I wanna leave just that nice, easy, angled cut just about a half an inch, you know, half inch, maybe inch past the bud that I want to keep. I can directional prune by heading back. You know, I can change the direction of this branch from going out. Now it's kind of gonna head more that way. Is that making sense to everybody? So I can change which the angle it grows and kind of maybe rejuvenate a little bit older plant if that's the way I want to go. Okay? So those are our two kind of easy ways to do here in the winter. Now, a big part of plant discussion to me in pruning is talking about old wood versus new wood. Okay, we have to know what plants in our yards bloom on brand new growth, or what I have to leave here in the winter that will bloom the next season. Is that making sense? So with all fruit and everything, it's going to be pretty easy because we're all working on old growth to get our production for the next season. But there's a lot of other plants that we might have, maybe spireas if you know that shrub, or pogotillas. A lot of good shrubs, I could do whatever I want to them here coming out of winter, shear them down towards the ground, up they grow, blooms come on, I'm happy as can be as a gardener. Other things I do that too, it'll grow, but it will let you know, okay, you get no flowers this year because I didn't leave old wood on there. So there's a lot of shrubs. You can ask me after class or bring it up in the questions if you're wondering about a specific thing, but always to me keep that in mind. That's a huge part of the decisions you make here on pruning, when to do it, how much to do it, and the timing during the season is going to be key, okay? So a couple little diagrams. You know, if I look at a branch, we'll borrow part of my pear here. We'll split him in half. So if I look at just any plant branch, you know, this happens to be a pear, which we'll do for the fruit, but I could look at a branch and I could literally follow the growth of that plant. You know, I have last year's growth, I have what grew the year before, or the year before that, and I can follow that sequence down through the structure. That's going to help me get old wood versus that new wood bloom. I want to look at types of buds we're looking at. If I look at that branch, what do I have? An apical bud. This is what's going to keep going out until I tell it not to. On a fruit tree, I probably don't want to get it super huge, so I am going to head back here and there to get that structure right. If I'm looking at lateral buds, these are what's going to give me side branching, more bloom down the road, more production if that's what I want. And certainly other plants, if we take something like boxwood or shrubs, I could prune and I have so many lateral buds on there that wherever I cut, I don't have to sit here for an hour and pick little buds on stems of boxwood. I could shear that off because it's going to break bud, fill in, and give me a thicker, fuller plant. So lateral buds going to give me bushiness, you know, or structure. picking out the apical bud is going to give me either height at the tip of a tree or, again, the branches that I want from side to side. Okay? So you'll see the basics like I showed you on the pruning cut there. There's a couple of examples. And it's also showing you what we call opposite bud plants versus alternate bud plants. If I look at that pear, how's it growing? Bud, 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 right? Back and forth, across. So I can prune there to grow this direction. I can prune there to grow that direction. By picking the bud I want to prune above, that's going to help me get the direction I want. Opposite bud plants are really easy ones, hydrangea. Pretty much everybody got a hydrangea. So if I look at a stem of that, what do I have? Perfect pairs of buds that are opposite. I simply prune the stem down, one flower came off, now I have 2 buds that send up and I got 2 flowers next year. Okay, that's how easy that is. So if you kind of think of the way to prune opposite versus the alternate buds. You'll see on the pictures there, you know, again, I like in Washington, it's not the end of the world, but I'm going to try to never cut flat to the sky. You know, I don't want to be parallel to the sky. What happens here in Washington in the winter? Rain, rain, and more rain. If I have a big chunk water sitting on there, that's where I will have maybe issues with a little rot or perhaps disease getting in there. If I leave it slanted, it's going to heal a little better, and again, the water is going to tend to run off a little bit more. I'll have a little bit happier cut. Okay, so try to keep that 1/2 inch above the bud again. Pick the direction I want it to go, and then keep that angled a bit so we don't have the water on there. Now, just a couple quick diagrams, you'll see the difference here. This is what I wish driving around I would see people do in their yard. Not top trees, not destroy them, not call the tree service with a chainsaw and round the thing off or coppice it. Sometimes we have to do what we have to do. They always grow, it's not that. But I would much rather have you look at a before and after like that. I haven't changed the shape of my shade tree or whatever kind of tree it is at all, but I've got daylight, I've got sun, I've got dead wood out of the center. I can really see through that thing. I've got a much happier plant, and I think a much more attractive tree going in the landscape long term. Now that's kind of the opposite of what we're going to talk about today, because we're going to torture and butcher and almost bonsai our fruit trees and things. So on the right there's a little different. That is a tree that I'm going to top. I'm going to top my apple, I'm going to top my pear, I'm going to top all that stuff, because I don't want this, I want this. You know, who wants to get on the fire ladder to pick the apple tree at the top of their tree, right? That's why we have smaller rootstocks now. That's why we're able to get at these things with a pole pruner, because I keep my fruit tree down and spreading. You know, we had fruit trees over at our place in Clay Ellen for 30 years, and I had to get nothing but a 2-step ladder to pick everything on all of them. Now, you know as well as me, depending on what you have, some stuff is going to want to get up more. Your pears typically and your apples, and they may take a little more pruning to keep them down. But if you do that, you're going to win. You're going to have, I think, a pretty nice looking tree that you're able to pick for maximum production, okay? Now, one thing I always mention this time of year, we didn't get the snowmageddon, we just got the coldmageddon, right? So sometimes we get a lot of breakage during the winter. You know, we've got old evergreen trees, a limb snaps, you know, this happened, that happened. Make sure when you go out, you know, if my arm is a limb of a big old tree in my yard and I've seen it break and snap, right? It's got to come off eventually at some point. You can get off any time, but what I see most people do is grab the chainsaw and just throw it on top and start sawing. What's going to happen? It's going to crack, peel the weight, and I'm going to strip all the bark down below that. So always go up, cut through the armpit first, then we can sever it. Now I can go back and make a third cut and get it nice and tidy to the collar of the tree, and I'm going to have no dieback again, much less chance of getting disease, and I'm not going to peel all the skin off my tree, okay? Multi-stem pruning, you know, you can just see that quick little shade. We're going to look at this a little closer here in a second with blueberries, because that's a perfect blueberry example for our orchard discussion. But look at the shading versus the dark. You can see that at least where, again, I haven't changed the size of my high bush blueberry at all. All I've done is go straight to the bottom and thinned out the oldest wood. I want sun, I want air, I want to keep fresh growth coming on, so I go to the base. I'm not grabbing my head shears and chopping my blueberry off and rounding it off. Yeah, sure, it'll grow, but you're going to get minimal production. and it's not gonna give you the berries that you want down the road. So try to look at multi-stem. There's a lot of plants that we have in our yards like that, not just berries, but put a lot of plant choices that are multi-stem. Attack the base, open that up, get some old wood out of there, and then what's left is going to be much healthier, and you keep that rejuvenation going. Okay. There's all kinds of issues with that little guy. You know, I could look at a tree here. This is the time of year in the winter where I can look at these deciduous plants and really see the structure. What's dead wood? What is crossed against each other? What's rubbing on another limb? Broken branches, all these things that I can really see in the wintertime, but I really have an easy time on hopefully a nice sunny day that I can get in there and get that stuff taken care of. So this is the time of year, to me, a lot of thinning, tree repair. We let our specimen leaf out in spring, and we think about maybe one more session in the summer as we go along. Okay? Now, if we were going to get you just a couple of rules today to live by, okay? 1/3 rule. I break it all the time. Probably everybody's breaking the 1/3 rule. I do at least once a year in my own yard, see what happens. But I never want to cut more than 1/3 of height or spread. You're always going to be safe if we do that with no matter what plant we're talking. Some things we can get away with far more than that. I've taken some rhodies from 8 feet down to 1 foot, just try to let them start over again and get some better shape to them. So there's things we can get away, but you're always taking a chance that plant may not come back if we go more than 1/3. Prune after bloom is my #1 rule, and you are never going to lose with that in the general yard. You know, if I've got something, whether it's new wood bloom, old wood bloom, it doesn't matter. If I let it flower and then I prune it, now I can get new growth, I can set my flower buds, and off we go for another year. You know, think of all, maybe as some easy examples, think of all the flowering trees in your yard. You might have, anyone got dogwoods? Okay, we got flowering cherry, we got flowering plums, we got magnolias, and we go on and on and on. If I walked out to any one of your trees right now and looked at it, I'd say, oh look, there's all your flower buds you're going to see here in a month or 2 or whenever it is. So what am I not going to go do here in the winter? I'm not going to walk out and hack back my blooming trees, because it's not going to hurt the tree again. But what's the reason I have that prize magnolia in my front yard? I want to see all the flowers, right? So let it bloom, then walk out and do whatever you want, because now in the summer, I regrow, I set my flower bud, I get to enjoy that in 2025. Is that kind of making sense to everybody? So be careful. Again, prune after bloom, I think, is a great way to go. You know, this is one I remember growing up. You know, it was winter time, so what do we do at the farm? We go out and prune every single thing in the winter, right? Because that's the only time we prune. This isn't me trying to tell you to go home and prune your whole yard. You know, have a purpose. Why are you pruning that thing? You know, is it the simple fact like today, I want more fruit, I want more berries, I want more bloom, whatever the case is. Maybe the neighbor's lawyer's threatening to sue you because now your tree is blocking her view of the sound. You know, whatever it is, there better be a reason. You don't have to go out and prune anything. Let's start with that. So have a good reason of why you want to do it, and then let's move on. I would, like I said, the last thing there, I would always attack structure issues in the dormant season. Late spring, summertime is a great time. The weather's a lot warmer, usually a little nicer sun out, and then we get in towards summer. I can go out and do a lot of thinning and some other things on plants at that point. I don't have to do all of it right now. I would really focus on dead wood, bad structure, all that stuff here in the winter. I could go back and do a little bit of thinning and fix them heading back and take a branch or here or there when I see how it leads back out in spring, okay? Now, one thing that's not special today is our dormant spray. So if you're gonna do some shopping after class, you'll see those 2 products. I think we've tried a number of different dormant sprays. There's a lot of good ones out there. If you have something in the garage, don't go dump it in the toilet or recycle it. Use it up. There's probably nothing wrong with it. But I think these are probably the 2 best things I've seen on the market these days. Horticultural oil is OMRI listed organic. If I have last year had issues with any kind of bug, disease, whatever it is, and I want to start fresh here, A, we clean up debris. We don't leave that stuff on the ground. It's going to fester and get right back on the same plant next year. And B, I can pick some time here over the dormant season. I wouldn't be in a rush to do it yet, especially with the cold. Do it here later January to mid-February. Before these things bloom, I get an oil spray on there. Oil basically coats everything. It's going to run and cover buds and cracks and crevices and everything on that plant. I cut off oxygen between whatever's stuck to my tree and open air. You're going to get bug eggs, you're going to get things that are hiding in there. I know apple maggots is one that tends to tuck itself in little buds on your tree, and then you get your maggot fly right back next year. So dormant spray oil would be a great one, in addition to disease, the liquid cop. So this is a different type of copper that tends to glue to trees a lot better, lasts about 30 days. That is something I would get in the habit of using more than just here in the winter. We can use a good natural fungicide like liquid cop, something safe for edibles that I can put on occasion to control disease. So again, if I had, you know, everything from dogwood anthracnose to scab on my apple tree to peach leaf curl, all the stuff that we would get on plants up here, I want to get this on here now before it blooms. I want to let my trees flower after I have petal drop and my little mason bees have done their thing and pollinated my tree. I want to get it on there again, and then I want to wait 30 days and I want to get it on there again. So if you want clean fruit, especially when we talk peach, nectarine, apricot, that kind of stuff for Western Washington is just a little bit tougher. I got to keep that liquid cop or a similar fungicide on there to keep my plants clean, okay? But for now, you got 20% off the dormant spray. That's a great deal to get you going here for spring. Now, if we talk in to some fruit-specific stuff here, let me see. How am I doing with time? I think our clock's right. Oh yeah, we got time. So if we talk about kind of spur fruits, we would call it first. So who's got apples and pears? We got a few. So this is something, you know, that's a little different. We'll talk this half of it first and then another style of fruit tree here second. But apples and pears are what we call spur fruits. You know, if I borrow my pear branch back, you know, what matters with this? I want to eat it, right? I'm not growing this because I want a beautiful Japanese maple specimen in the front yard. I want an orchard that I can pick and eat. So I want this. I want spurs is all that matters. This is the only place on these 1-year-old branches that I'm going to get bloom and a cluster of fruit to enjoy. If you look at a spur type fruit, the hardest part pruning these is this is a 3-year process, I hate to say, and this is maybe sometimes where we get a little confused. So I grow out, I wonder if my other branch, this one's better. So I can follow this here for the last couple years, right? We pruned this probably a little too late last year. This is over in the yard here. But this is what grew out last summer. There's the year before, and then we follow that down, any plant, right? We look at how old that wood is. So where is all my spurs? Not on last year's growth, on 2 years ago growth. So I see a lot of people that walk out and see growth on apples and pears that shoots up to the sky and just saw it all off. So yeah, it's not gonna, again, hurt the tree, but if I leave no 1-year-old wood, I'm not gonna get any spurs the next year that I can start picking the 3rd year. Is that making sense? So I have to pick and choose kind of how we grow this year to year. I'm never gonna take everything off of it. I'm gonna leave one, cut it in half. Get rid of this one, leave one, cut it. Does that make sense? So I'm not gonna leave this mess of suckers going for the sky. I'm gonna pick one that's going a direction I like, and I'm gonna take it from 6 feet down to 3 or 4 buds and leave a stub. Now that'll grow up the next year, and I will get great spur development on that old 1-year-old chunk of wood. Is that making sense? So no sawing off. Pick and choose a few to keep and gradually build that structure up. Not let it go for a year. I've seen the apple suckers 6 or 8 feet tall. Now we're stuck with our, hey, I'd like to grab that apple up there, but I can't get to it anymore. So get those, you know, maybe you've got an old tree of one of these and you're like, all right, start over again. No problem. Sacrifice this year. Do what I just said not to do. Coppice all that stuff off of there. Pick your scaffolding branches and start to build your structure again. Yeah, you won't have any apples or minimal maybe this year, 1 more year, but then wham. Now I've got a manageable tree that's back in shape that I'm going to get good quality fruit on long term. Okay? So if we look at those tips right there, again, prune to lateral buds to encourage a spread. If this is coming out of my top of my tree, I don't want to just keep taking this off every year. I want to go, oh, let's cut it there, because now my branch will develop a nice flat horizontal angle that'll keep my tree down. I'm not going to leave it up here. What has happened with this year is going to go straight for the sky. You know, we're going to go straight up. So I'll coppice it down a little bit, create the scaffolding branches, but I'll have a much nicer shape. This time of year, you know, certainly if you haven't, yes, you can start getting those suckers cut back and pick your structure again. Thinning out dead wood, again, open air. The more sun, the more air circulation, especially on this fruit stuff, you're going to have way less disease. No scab, all these different issues that blow around here in the wind and rain. If I have good air circulation, good sun in there, I'm not going to have as much problem having to spray, okay? So it's a good time to thin. I would look at cutting back the shoot ups, the water sprouts and things. Again, 3 to 4 buds out to keep, pruning the lateral buds that keep my shape going the way I want it and not up. And I can do that a little bit here in the winter. I tend to probably even do that a little bit more in early summer. You know, the tree blooms, it leaves out, you can see what it wants to do. I walk out there in June and say, okay, I'm gonna leave you, cut you back, get rid of this, and I can do maybe one more little quick thinning in the summer so that I'm ready again for the next season, okay? Biggest thing is, know your spurs. That one kills me. If you can't, we can pass this branch around or look online. Just type in the magic search engine. Fruit tree spurs. You get all kinds of pictures of apple and pear. They look almost identical. But you can say, oh yeah, I see what he means. There's going to be a leaf. There's a leaf. Oh wait, I'm going to get a flower there. I'm going to get a flower there. I'm going to get a, you know, you're going to follow that structure down. Okay. So just a couple things. You know, we don't have fruit in. Typically we have fruit out, and I can bring a tree in here and kind of show you how to start out with a new one. But if you're going to add a new tree, sacrifice when they're young. You know, let my staff or me or whoever, when you get a new fruit tree, cut the thing in half. It sounds funny, but we don't want this. I want short. We're going to thin out some branches for you, set the structure right, so down the road you don't have to do all this work. So really sacrifice when they're young. Like I mentioned, battling an old tree, you know, really cut that thing back. I've done this a lot of times over my years. You can't, you know, again, maybe you lose a season of fruit production, maybe 2 at the worst, but you bought a house and you're looking at an apple tree that's 30 feet tall and 40 feet across, and it's covered in moss, and you can't even see through it, it's so woody. What do I do to fix it? I gotta get that thing cut back, thinned out, press the reset button. Now we can start to get the shape we want down the road. Yes?
I have a specific question. I've been battling old trees, and I've been sort of hesitant to cut this branch that goes over my garage that drops apples all over.
Yep.
Can I just cut that off?
You can cut it off. If it's not big, you're probably, she asked about it, everyone didn't hear her. She got a huge branch that's kind of going over her garage.
It's a pretty big branch.
So it might be having somebody help you. This would be a lot of weight, but you might be like chunk, and then we get the last chunk off of there. Yeah, wait till we get past the, yeah, wait till we get past the cold here, and then we can kind of have out those larger projects. Yeah, just do one more, and we're going to do questions at the end, so we can keep it going. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have an apple tree that had a really rough year after summer before last. Molds just tore up its base.
Okay.
Last year, tiny leaves, very few. I stripped the fruit off. It's fairly good. Do I cut it way back? Do I pull it out?
I would probably see how it leaves out this year, and I'd get some really good food on it. I think apple, it'll reestablish some roots pretty quick, but I'd get a really good organic fruit tree fertilizer down here, like probably 1st of February, and right when it starts to break bud, we've got that usable food in the soil, hopefully get a little kick, and we start to redevelop.
Okay.
Yeah, just, and again, we'll have plenty of time here when we get done. We'll whip through to the last. So, old tree, anyone got espaliers? You know, our favorite espalier, right? We get to borrow from the French. So I can go show you ours after the class, if that would make it easier. I've cut one already, and we've left one alone. We have 2 right in our gardens right outside here, because now we are really bonsai, torture, however you want to call it. That's what we're doing with that fruit tree. I don't want anything going up. I'm trying to grow a fruit tree laterally along a fence. I don't have room. It's a great way to grow fruit, I'll tell you, and you get a lot of production if you do it right, but it's a totally different creature where I don't want anything going up except short nodes, and I'm trying to go that way, the opposite of everything else. So why don't, after class, if you guys are curious about, I know it's a little chilly, we can stop out there for a second. You can kind of see that's done. This one we're going to do here pretty quick. So You'll see a couple pictures, and again, it's not any different than the other diagrams we've looked at for the trees, except for, again, noticing where the spurs are. You can see no new growth has nothing but leaves. I can follow that down 1 year, and now I can start to see those little spurs popping off my wood where I'm going to get production. So keep that in mind when you pick your places to prune. Then we save some spurs. You know, that was a little, I tried to get this less blurry because this is a slide I borrowed from a really old one I did like 30 years ago. But you can see kind of the shading on those things is the big thing. How not to do it and how to do it, especially when we talk young trees. I don't want this going straight up. I want this horizontal. I want to get rid of some wood when they're young. I'm probably chopping it in about half. And I want to develop that spacing and that scaffolding look on a typical spur fruit as it grows. Again, much better sun, better production, a little easier to pick. Now the other half of this is stone fruits. So we get into the, you know, peaches, cherries, plums, nectarines, apricots, all the things. You know, we'll talk about varieties and choices and that kind of stuff with the fruit class, so we'll just focus on the pruning of them. It's a little bit different than the spurs. This is a piece of cherry here, and the big difference is what? I don't have to wait the 3, it's just the 1. So I can look at all the growth that came out last year, and I have flower buds on all that. Okay, I'm not waiting 1 more year and then getting my spurs like the spur, like what we just saw. So plum, cherry, you could walk out if you have one of those trees, look at your 1-year-old wood, and you're going to see a bazillion little flower buds sitting there. As soon as we get warm, sometimes these are opened up by Valentine's Day, even later February. So plum usually first with peach, and we start to get into the cherries and some of the other stuff as we go through. So think of it maybe a little easier if you want to think of it that way. Again, it doesn't change the fact that I can't come in the winter and coppice this and head it back, because I'm just going to cut off all my production wood. So I'm going to let this bloom. Oftentimes, if you know cherries and plums and things, much earlier to pick, June, July, I can prune after bloom if I want to, or after I pick in this case, and do it that way. Again, I'm going to focus on this time of year, thinning it out and getting it headed back to the direction I want to. So that's a pretty good branch. You know, I don't really need to do anything with that off my tree. It's got nice spacing, it's going the direction I wanted. I feel bad for borrowing it, but it is what it is. So you'll see, again, this is where I will get a flower here pretty quick, and that production coming off that first season. So a little bit easier to do. It doesn't change the same. I want to prune to a lateral bud. You know, if I want to cut this cherry back, it's getting too wide for me. You know, I'm going to still pick a point, you know, right above a branch that just sends that energy into a different direction. So I can still head it back if I needed to. I can thin it out if it's a little crowded. A lot of times, if you ask me, that would be the #1 thing I think for homeowners. If you have a peach, a cherry, a nectarine, you probably got a lot of dead wood in the center. So we can get in the middle of that thing, clean all that out of there. A lot of times you stand back like, oh sweet, I got everything I need. Now I can worry about heading it back a little bit if it's getting a little big, okay? So keep that in mind. I would concentrate again on thinning out, looking for diseased wood. I always tell people, you know, winter looks dead on just about anything, right? You know, we'll talk about grapes here in a minute. I think grape looks like the deadest plant on earth in the winter. It's like, that's never gonna grow. So what do? I grab my fingernail or my pruners. If I just lightly nick the bark, I'm always gonna see that super bright, healthy cambium right underneath that bark skin. So if you're up there, I don't know, is that alive or is it dead? Just nick it real carefully, just in a spot. Oh yeah, I got green wood, I can leave it if I want. Oh, I got nothing, let's get it out of here. Now I made room for a new one to develop, okay? I would always, you know, you'll see there kind of the 4th one down. I would always cut back peach, nectarine, apricot about 20%, period. That's not cherry, not plum, but the peaches in particular, the apricots and the nectarines. You know, we live in Western Washington. We'll talk a lot about this, the fruit class. We got wet, wet, and wet here in spring, and those are probably the trees that are a little bit more disease prone. So I have to spray if I'm gonna have a happy peach, even though I bought the Frost most disease resistant peach. It doesn't mean immune over here. So I have to spray a little bit, and all the infections on trees like that happen at the tips and then work their way down through the wood, okay? So I found if you walk out before they bloom, because that's where the infection's gonna get into the flower, I walk out there, maybe it's early February, Valentine's Day-ish, before they flower. If I go back and trim the tips of all those branches back about 20%, I've gotten rid of probably the black wood, the dead part that's diseased. I'm gonna have much healthier bud break, and then off we go for the springtime. So that's a huge one here with me and our staff. You know, we sell a lot of, everybody wants to grow a peach tree. So we go through probably 100 frost peaches every single spring, and that's more than any other type of fruit we sell. So frost peach is like, hey, before you take that home, do you mind if I prune it for you? Usually they're like, what's he doing? He's taking half my tree off, and where's this going and all that. We're trying to help you for the long term. So if you have one already, don't be bashful about tip pruning a little bit. You still got plenty of wood to flower and produce, but you're really going to cut down on your disease, your leaf curl, and all the rest of it, okay? And again, sacrifice on young trees, like I just said, we tend to prune them probably down about half. You can see there a perfect little cherry diagram. I've got my clusters of those flower buds on 1-year-old wood. I can get my production on there, happy cherries, if the birds don't take them first, and off we go. I got a little cherry pie for the to enjoy the midsummer here. You can see the pruning point. You know, if I'm gonna cut back this flowering cherry, it's getting a little big. Like I said, I can go back and thin out pieces, let these take over. Maybe it's even half of this to, again, the bud that I want the direction it's going. I'm not just gonna blindly cut it off. I'm gonna go, wait, if I prune that there, it's going that way. If I prune it there, it's coming this way. You can really get your direction figured out, okay? You'll see the same thing. You know, there's a great peach diagram and a plum right there. All, you know, if anyone got plum, you know what I mean. What do I have last summer? You know, 10, 12 feet probably shooting up for the sun. So again, it's similar to the apple and prairie discussion, that I'm not gonna walk out and saw it all off. That's not the answer, but it's standing back going, okay, I'm gonna leave you, cut you down to 3 or 4 buds. Get rid of that one, get rid of this one, leave you, cut it down to 3 or 4 buds. Now I can develop again that same spreading, easy crown that I'll have easier time picking and won't have to worry about quite as much. Okay, so how about we go, there's some fruit. Now we'll talk berries here real quick and then do some questions. So, blueberries, who's got blueberries? You got a few? Yeah, I do too, that's my favorite. So blueberries is a really easy thing to prune. I don't know, for some reason people are freaked out about pruning their blueberries, and it's gotta be the easiest thing to prune that we'll talk about today. So if I look at any blueberry, it's the same discussion as the fruit. I looked at my plant right now in the winter, it's bare, right? What do I have at the tip of all those pieces of wood that grew last year? Those are all my flower buds. I'm gonna get my berries to enjoy in the summer, right? So never shear your blueberry back, and that's the #1 rule. We're not going to shear it back. Will it kill it? No, but then you don't have any fruit this year. If you cut all your 1-year-old wood off, you have 0 berries to enjoy for 2024. What I want to do is thin. We saw that multi-stem diagram earlier. We'll see one here on blueberry in a second. I'm not looking up here, I'm looking at the bottom. So I get down at the base and I saw or lopper out the oldest pieces out of that plant and open up the base. Maybe I got 9 huge stems in my clump. Now I got 5. You know, I want space in between them. I'm gonna make more room for fresh wood off the root system, and I keep that cycle going down the road. So it's never this, it's at the base, and I'm gonna pull pieces out of that plant and open up the entire structure. Again, more sun, less disease, better production, and I keep that cycle of the oldest wood coming out and the new growth replacing it every season, okay? So in late winter here, again, all this stuff, I should have said this at the beginning, all this stuff we're talking about today, I'm not telling you to go home and do it today. It's way too cold to prune. So put the pruners in the pocket and walk away and come back and do it here in a few weeks. So my time would be, again, late-ish winter. I get into that early mid-February time frame. Sometimes we go snowbird in the south. Maybe it's the 1st of March. Before bloom is ideal. But we have some time to do this. You don't need to go home and do this in the next week or 2. So later winter, remove the old growth all the way to the soil level. You'll thin out the plant at the base. That's a really easy way to do blueberry. All the flowering is on 1-year-old wood, so avoid the shearing. Be careful with evergreen ones. Does everyone have, anybody have like Bountiful Blue, Sunshine Blue? So that's what I have a lot in my yard as well. It doesn't change that maybe we have to prune it. It's not ever going to be as big like a high bush blueberry, but because they're evergreen, again, shearing is a little bit easier on those, but I would do it after I pick. If for me, I never shear still, but I'm taking little pieces out and almost like half thinning it about every summer. And that's not a winter thing to me. That would be a summer one on evergreen ones, okay? So you could keep, I've got evergreen ones I've had for a decade plus. They're literally like 3 feet, 3 feet. Nice, easy, little bit smaller blueberries. And they'll drop some leaves here with the cold this week, but they do keep their foliage in the winter, which is nice. You want to always keep fresh suckering wood at the base. That's the #1 thing with blueberry. If I cut out old wood, I feed them with the good acidic rhodey food, and I mulch the daylights out of them. That's the one plant that I'm not a big bark fan. I still use compost, but I could grab a bag of bark, a bag of compost, whatever mulch I want, put a big dose of food around the base here in February, and then mulch them 3-4 inches. Bury the stems. That's one plant that won't matter. I want the root system wet, and I keep that wood coming off the base that way, okay? So you'll see on the picture there, fruit buds, flower buds, on the right on the tips of that, and it's almost the same diagram that we looked at for that multi-stem. I had a thick, nothing wrong with it, but I had a big, thick, stemmy blueberry that'd been there for years. I have the same height, picked about the same amount of berries this summer, but I've gotten into the base and taken out some of those big pieces so I can open up that whole structure, okay? Raspberries is a little bit different. You could, if you don't know the variety you have, we would need to know that to tell you which way to go. If you don't, we can find out by pruning, and you'll know the first year which one you have. But essentially, with this, we have kind of a mix. This is the first one we kind of do both. So June-bearing raspberries, most of your U-pick farms, a lot of people use these. That blooms and produces on old wood. So I get one crop a year in that late spring, early summer time frame that I pick, I use, and I'm done, right? So that's on old wood. I can't go out in the winter and saw canes off or cut them back severely because I just won't get any berries, okay? I have to leave those old arching canes to get the fruit to pick that season. Does that make sense to everybody? We have everbearing. That's the best of both worlds. I do a little bit of both at my place, but I go more everbearing than June. So that I get both ways. Whatever wood I left from last year, I pick in June, and then whatever growth comes up that spring to summer, I pick again late summer, fall. Does that make sense? So if I want fresh, I tend to go for the everbearing. I get a couple crops and I get longer fresh berries to eat. If I'm freezing, jam, doing processing, I might want one massive crop in June that I can do something with, freeze, and walk away. And I got my stash for the next year, if that makes sense, okay? So knowing which one you have of those two is going to change your, pick which way you're going to go, okay? Because this time of year we want to walk out, and if we look at that row, okay, that's typically how we're going to train raspberries in a row. If I walk out to my row and I'm just seeing cane after cane after cane, some of those got to go. We got to thin that out. It's a lot of this. It's similar to the blueberry in the fact that we saw those off of the ground and more comes off the root system. So I might look at a row and I'm picking I want one nice cane every foot. You could have a few different rules with that, but I want maybe one nice old cane per foot. I enjoy the production. Maybe the next year it comes out to the ground because another one has taken its place. Does that make sense? So it's probably one good kind of cleanup here late winter where you can go along and say, okay, he's out of here, that one's out of here, I'm keeping this. You thin your row out at the ground level a little bit, and then you can stand back and say, okay, I can't even get in here and pick because the raspberries have arched all the way over my thing and it's dragging on my bald head. I don't want to bleed anymore. So I go, okay, maybe I leave the wood, but I might take that cane back and get it to a certain height, and I still will get the bud break, the bloom, and then production on what's left, okay? So I'm not going to chop everything in half. You're going to severely cut your production down, but I can be very careful which ones I want to leave a little longer, thin out the row, head back some of those larger ones that I leave, and I keep that cycle going down the row. Okay. So you can prune back if you've got June bearing only. You can see right there, prune them back hard when you're done picking, because I've just killed my old wood, I've picked all my berries, and now I could really cut them back, because whatever grows the rest of the summer, I got a new cane that hardens off, and then that is my wood for next year. Okay, so cut those back hard. You have to pick either summer, or you can do both with ever-bearing ones. You know, you could do, I tend to do a light pruning the 2 times a year versus one or the other. So you can see the picture there. You know, again, usually you need a support or something to hold these canes up. There's a lot of good dwarfish ones these days that maybe we don't have to do this with anymore. But any kind of old school, good farm raspberry, I want a little support, and I want that row contained. Raspberry is all about root system. I mean, you know raspberries, you know what I mean. I put a row in, and now I got another row, and then I got another row. They don't end. If I could do mine over again, I would have put bamboo barrier or something down the sides of my row so I can keep my OCD aisle going. But it's one that'll keep going. I want roots because that's going to continue to give me new wood. Okay. Now brambles, a little bit different. You know, I'm not talking about our native blackberry, which frankly is not even native here. It's from the Himalayas. Cascade blackberries are native here, but when we talk about brambles, you know, it's tayberries, it's marionberries, it's boysenberries, loganberries. We can go on and on and on. It's all those really good things I like to have in pies. These are my favorite berries. So I tend to do a lot of marionberries are mine. It's a little bit different in that we got to get used to maybe 2 new words. We say primocane and floricane. Okay, so you can see the difference here if we look on old wood. Okay. So all primocanes are current wood, floricanes are old wood. All production on traditional brambles is going to happen on 1-year-old wood, not what grew this season, but the floricanes from the last year. All right. So if I picked a branch of blackberries on my gourmet bush, I could just take that piece out after I pick it and I'm done. Does that make sense? It's done its thing. It's out of here because another piece is about to replace it. I get to pick that next year, and then we just follow that cycle. So we don't have to let blackberries take over our entire yard, which is what the non-native ones are doing. We can keep them pretty tidy in rows. I mean, this is something I don't need a raspberry support, a little bit shorter, but I can keep really good producing berries like that on a pretty tidy scale just with that annual cycle. Get rid of what I just picked because it's done and over with. Another piece grew out. That's what I have for next year. We just follow that season to season. Okay? So there are some new ones, not to confuse you, but this is kind of the way the breeders are going with berries. There are some new ones now that we would say are ever-bearing brambles, and that's probably brand new just in the last 4 or 5 years. So there are a few blackberries that we get production on both types of wood. So I get 2 crops. So that might be an option if you're looking at putting some new ones in. You would have the option of like, yeah, I'd just like to have the one big crop again like me to freeze, bring out bags all season long and enjoy, or maybe you want that second crop to pick. So if we get a decent summer, a lot of these new ones I'll get that same big crop on old wood, you know, in June, July, then all the wood that grew out that summer I'll have to pick, bloom and pick again in the fall. So you'd have 2 sessions with it, okay? So don't cut out, the biggest thing with this is kind of like the raspberry, I'm not sawing everything off. If I don't leave my primal canes from the season before, then I'm not going to have any bloom. Excuse me, I'm not going to have any berries at all to pick that next season, because it's again a 1-year-old wood that's going to give me the production. So you'll see, I think kind of good, bad, and better at the far end. That's all I need. You know, if I drove past the U-Pick farm here when they're done pruning, you're like, that's all that's left? Because that's all it is. I want old wood, some little short buds again, 3-4 buds of old wood that's going to bloom like crazy, produce my berries, and then off we go for another season. I don't need to leave that huge tangled mess. I mean, that's kind of what our native ones tend to do, but we can really open these plants up with some pruning here before we get into spring. I mentioned grapes. We just got a couple left here and we'll get you out. So grapes, is kind of one that does look dead as a doornail. This is a really tough one to tell people where to prune, because you look at a grape and it just all looks like dead brown wood. You can't even hardly see a bud on a grape. But again, if I drove out in the valley, I went by a winery, what am I looking at? Plant torture. Like, that's all that is, and you got all those wine grapes off that little tiny thing, because I don't want all that wispy growth again. I want the old structure of that grape, because that's what's going to drop the flower and give me maximum production. Now, if I'm trying to cover, I love grape foliage. I think it's a cool plant, beautiful fall color. Maybe you're the opposite. Like, I'm good, I like a couple bunches of grapes, but I want to cover my arbor. All right, well, don't prune it as much. It doesn't matter to the grape. But if you're strictly going for production, again, late winter here coming up, we really want to nip those grapes back and get our structure set. So, time to do that. My rule was always kind of a pencil. Any wispy kind of stringy growth, get it out of there. You cut back the older arms to kind of shorter chunks, whether you're throwing it on a trellis or an arbor or whatever you're doing. But I don't want all that little tendril growth that can all come out and get recycled in yard waste. And I usually say less than a pencil. You know, if it's not a pencil thick, just get rid of it. Again, if you want to cover something, you don't have to prune as much. It's not going to hurt the plant. But it's harder to look at a grape and go, oh, I can see the bud, we'll prune there. You can tell it's alive if you nick the bark. I mean, the grapes are super hardy. I doubt you'd ever lose a grape here in the winter. But look at the wood and try to leave those arms so that I get maximum bloom and then maximum grape production, okay? Like I said, don't be bashful on some of these vining fruits. We'll do kiwi here next. You can really cut these back. They'll grow like 10 feet a season if you've got happy feet and some fertilizer. They'll grow very, very fast. Which the kiwi is the next. Very similar to grapes to me, producing on old wood. I don't want all that tendril growth. I want less than a pencil out of there. That's an easy way to think of it. I really go to the end of winter on this one. I think, anyone got kiwis? You got fuzzy kiwi? Hardy kiwis? So hardy kiwis I'm not as worried about. If you're gonna do, they call them Arguta or Arctic kiwis, I could do that whenever. Those are super hardy. If I have a fuzzy, wait till the very end. Hopefully we're past frost, because those are kind of right on the hardy line around here. And I found if you open them up in February, we get a cold spell, you might have some wood damage on fuzzy. I don't think that'd happen on your hardy or grape kiwis. So I would wait to the real tail end of winter after the last heavy frost to prune them, especially the fuzzy kinds. Again, it's really up to you. I mean, we grew kiwis growing up, and my folks still do. Yeah, it's cool to have some kiwis to eat, but it's a cool vine just to grow on a structure. So he's not, you know, my dad's never going to hack it back and do a super hard prune on it, because he wants the growth and the foliage and to cover something. If we were going strictly production, we could get away with cutting it back much harder than that. You know, kiwi is a massive plant. You know, if we talked about grapes and all this other stuff, fine, that's manageable. I could let a raspberry go and I might get 6-8 feet tall. If I let a kiwi go, it's got something to climb on, it might get like 50 feet tall. So it'll grow fast and it gets a big plant, so give it some room. Currants, and anyone grow currants? Got a couple. So this is again a one that we would prune, to me, after pick. I don't mind a little bit of thinning in the winter time. Currants all produce on 1-year-old wood. So again, if I walk out here in February, it's getting too big, I'm going to cut it in half. It's not going to kill the plant, but you probably just removed all of your flowering potential and production for the season. So kind of like blueberry, I'd look at the base and thin out some pieces, okay? And if I really had to cut it back for height, as soon as I pick them, usually it's in June when I pick them, now, okay, let's go down a little bit here and there, because that new growth can still grow, set flower buds, and then I have more currants for 2025, okay? Huckleberries. You know, this is one of my favorites. Huckleberries on ice cream, huckleberries on a little bit of anything. So I have both these in my yard, and if we go out hiking, we look in our native woods. These are both Washington natives, easy to grow here. Red huckleberries we would typically see growing out of old stumps. You know, we go out in the woods and we see the stump and the nurse log, and there's the cool red huckleberry growing out of it in shade. I actually found a cool stump where I planted mine in my yard like 20 years ago. They're a little tartar. Red berries are still good, I think, but that's a little different because those we would produce on, again, a 1-year-old wood. So I don't think I've ever touched mine for prune. It's up 6 or 8 feet tall underneath the roadie and just kind of does whatever it does. And my 2 sons usually steal most of my berries before I get them. But that's one that we would grow a little more shade, and we would leave that wood alone because it's going to bloom and produce on 1-year-old wood. The evergreen ones are a totally different creature. I think that's a really useful landscape plant around here for most all gardeners. Sun, shade, it's native, grows pretty much anywhere. It's a pretty plant. We get those delicious little dark blue blackberries on there. They're not big, but you get a little handful in the ice cream. That's about as good as it gets. So those produce on new wood. So I could almost do whatever I want to huckleberry. If you want to leave it alone, sweet, walk away. Your tips are always going to bloom and get you the more heavy production. So we could leave it alone, we could cut it back, coming out of winter, still grows up new growths, at flower buds, and we still got berries to pick. So we can kind of do whatever we like with huckleberries. That's a pretty easy one. So last thing here I'll mention, like today we tried to do kind of a crash course on pruning for production, and we did a little pruning in general, but I'm hoping we kind of understand a lot of this discussion is about, again, the old wood versus new wood, what blooms on what, and how can I maximize my production on my edible stuff. We're going to talk a lot of fruit trees at the class on the 27th, so 2 weeks from today. Our fruit will be here this week. Finally, I put it off a week because of the cold. And it's not that it's not hardy, we just can't leave bare root plants sitting out in frozen sawdust for 8 days. So it'll be here this week, and we'll get cooking on fruit pretty quick, and we'll have all the fruit out there ready to go for the sale here for the class. I always remind people it's an easy time of year to grab fruit because you're going to get a fat 30% off discount taking a home bare root. And it's really easy to transport a tree with no soil, take it home, pop it in the ground right away, and off you go for the spring. I'm not worried about a pot, soil, mess in my car, all the rest of it. Really easy way to go. The other half of this class was berries. Now, I've always done the berry class like mid-February, and we decided to try something different and push it towards later February this year. I think we'll have a little bit more in for you folks to choose from. That seems to be the complaints I hear when we do our class reviews. I wish you would have had more in for the sale of the berry class. So I think by that weekend we should have a little bit of just about everything in here, and you'd be able to have that, all the blueberries, all the currants, grapes, kiwis, pretty much all that other stuff. So we'll talk about growing, selecting, and things on both those classes coming up, okay? So you can always check. I know I get started on kind of the website with our marketing director, Nicole, in the fall. I believe all the new fruit stuff is up already. The new rose stuff is up already. The fruit and berry stuff is up. We start with those, and then we start picking away at rhodies and dogwoods and azaleas and all kinds of other stuff as we get into spring. But you should be able to go on there. You would see all the varieties we carry of all this. And we do record this video, so you can go back if you like, and it'll be up on YouTube here probably Monday. I don't know if I'll get it downloaded this weekend, but Monday it'll be up on YouTube. So lastly, before we do questions, I mentioned sale. So with all the classes, we try to do a little sale. We've got the dormant sprays on 20% off. If you need liquid copper or hort oil, grab those, enjoy the discount, throw them in the garage for a couple weeks here. You get out there a little later, January to mid-February, it'll be spray time. It'll get all your stuff protected for spring. Since it's so cold, we threw these on too. These are the same gloves I think all the staff buys now. Wonderful gloves. These are waterproof, not insulated, 20% off. We got all the sizes in there. These are waterproof and stuffed with insulation. So I think some fishermen even use these way up in the Arctic Circle. These are really warm, probably too warm for me. I tend to like the blue ones. But this will keep you warm and dry or dry. You got 20% on both those. And then all the pruning equipment. So if you want sharpeners, tools, pruners, saws, anything you want to add to the arsenal of weapons in your garage, take the 20% on that today too, because that's a good little discount here. And you got all the way to Friday to use it. So shop today or come down this week after it thaws out. We'll have both of them going. All right?